I never knew what it was like not to have pain and illness. And, when you're young, I used to think everyone is always in pain and everyone's always sick. It is important to accept that you're different, because if not, now you're going to feel like you're getting special treatment, when instead you're just getting what you need.
Welcome to the Sick is Cool podcast, the show that's here to empower you, inspire you, and remind you that even in the face of chronic illness, you can lead an extraordinary life. I'm your host, Aimee Esther, and I'm thrilled to have you join our community. I understand the daily struggles, the physical and emotional roller coasters, and the relentless search for purpose and joy amidst it all. Although none of us chose to be a part of the Sick Club, here we are, warriors navigating a world that often doesn't understand us. Together, we are going to build a vibrant and supportive community that celebrates resilience and courage of the chronically ill. Now let's dive into today's episode and start reshaping our perspective on chronic illness. All right, welcome, Sabina. You have the most beautiful name. I love it so much. So tell us a little bit about you so we can get to know you, how old you are, and kind of your work, school situation, anything else you want to share.
Yeah, so I'm Sabina, and I am 17 years old, and I've actually been homeschooled most of my life. So I've been homeschooled since second grade. I will be a senior in the fall, which is very crazy. However, my junior year this year has been mostly on medical leave. So that's its own battle in its own way. But I will be, hopefully, Lord willing, in the summer, starting some school again if I'm able. And just I literally have a notebook of everything I wrote down because I'm so forgetful, guys. But so for hobbies wise and stuff, I love spending time with the Lord. That's one of my favorite things. So I definitely go to the world and do so many other crazy things before that. But I also love spending time with my family, and I love filming YouTube videos and editing for my YouTube channel. I also love anime and manga. You can probably tell also by the posters on my wall.
I love it.
Yeah, that's one of my favorite things. And total shout out to my brother, because a couple years ago he got me into it, and I would have never known that it's one of my favorite things. So that's really cool. And also recently I've been trying to kind of get things up and going to start a small business. So I've been doing a lot of knitting for little crafts and doing some digital work. So we'll see if that does anything. And for an active side, which we're going to also talk about later, is dance has also been a huge part of my life since I was 6 years old. So I guess 11 years now. So that's crazy. And also last summer, I haven't been able to do it yet, but last summer I also did some skateboarding. So that was also fun. So yeah, that's kind of it for the hobbies. And then just as a background for my chronic illnesses, so I have Ehlers-Danlos syndrome. And if you don't know what it is, it's just a connective tissue disorder. So basically my body makes faulty collagen. So it sounds simple, but it's kind of crazy and complex because collagen makes up everything in your body. So it can affect so many different things, and you actually can get sub-illnesses underneath it. So I have postural or orthostatic tachycardia syndrome, or better known as POTS, because that's a mouthful, and dysautonomia, and sorry, my earbuds are everywhere, but yeah, and
right, I can still hear you, so you're good.
That's good. And then also it wasn't too concerning because we went to an allergist, but they did see some mast cell activation syndrome, stuff like that. So there's so many other sub things that can go underneath it, which is kind of crazy. But yeah, so that's kind of it for a little bit of the illness background and stuff.
Yeah, and that's so much to deal with for anyone, but especially when you're a teenager and you're trying to juggle all these things, school and social life and hobbies and starting a small business, and then on top of it, all these illnesses. So that is so much to deal with. Let's take a minute to talk about the sponsor of today's episode, Let's Get Checked. Let's Get Checked is a worldwide leader in at-home health tests that puts you in control of your healthcare. With Let's Get Checked, you don't even have to leave the comfort of your home. You don't have to go to a lab to get your blood drawn. It's very convenient. You can order a testing kit that will be delivered to you in discreet packaging. Once your sample arrives in the laboratory, confidential results will be available from your secure online account within 2 to 5 days. Let's Get Checked laboratories are CLIA AAA approved and CAP accredited, which are the highest ranking levels of accreditation. Your results are reviewed by LetsGetChecked's clinical team, and you'll have the option for a virtual consultation to discuss your results. In some cases, the clinical team can prescribe a medication that can be sent to your pharmacy of choice. I've tried out LetsGetChecked a few times now, and it's been so helpful in finding some help that I needed. I was going through a period where I had very limited energy. My fatigue seemed at its worst, and I was easily able to get my thyroid checked. And as someone who has young kids, very difficult to leave the house. It was so convenient to be able to take my blood test at home, send it in the mail, and have my results within a few days. Get easy to understand and actionable health insights in 2 to 5 days from the comfort of your own home. Visit trylgc.com/Aimee, that's AIMEE, to get 25% off your at-home test kit today. Everything you need is linked in the podcast show notes or in the description on the YouTube version of this podcast. Thanks again to Let's Get Checked for sponsoring this video. I am a big fan of them, and let's get back to the episode. So I want to know more about specifically your dance journey, because that is an active thing. And as we talked before the call, you mentioned that that's like a huge part of your life, right? Or at least it was. You tell me, how has your illness affected dancing?
Yeah, so it's also such an interesting question because you're born with Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, and I've actually had symptoms like onset since I was very, very young. Like, I even have memories like when between the ages of 3 and 6, and my parents even saw signs before I had memories. So it helped a little bit in a way because I never knew what it was like not to have pain and illness. So I grew up dancing just that way. So it wasn't like I had to adapt in a certain way. That's like how I learned. And, you know, when you're young, I used to think everyone is always in pain and everyone's always sick. I think that's a common thing among a lot of people who have symptoms younger, is like they kind of think that's normal, you know, like everyone deals with that. So that definitely, like, you know, there's that. But obviously it's not all sunshine and rainbows. There's like so much stuff. So I just kind of jogged my memory a little bit to try to go down memory lane and think of like certain things. I mean, like the mini ones were like, you know, a 6-year-old. I remember like complaining to my dance teacher like the first year about me being always in back pain and knee pain and stuff. And they're like, you know, what are you, like a little grandma or, you know, type thing, you know? And so there's that. I also, like, when I was younger, between like ages like 6 and like 10, I got constantly injured to the point like my parents were just like, we aren't taking you to the doctor anymore. I mean, it'd be elbows, it'd be shoulders, you know, like I would hurt my wrist or my feet. I mean, there's a few times like you see me pictures in class and I'm in the sling or something and like constantly injured. Like, you know, I can't remember, like my parents used to joke that they need to wrap me with bubble wrap or something because I was always injured. And also, I think what affected a little bit of my dance journey is I had, like, you know, a lot of series of actually medical tests when I was about 8 too. So I had so many tests, and I mean, I can't exactly remember how much of it affected dance specifically, but I'm sure I was out of dance for a little bit, undergoing a lot of tests and stuff. Also, something I noted is when I was 9 years old, I had 3 ingrown toenail removal surgery. Well, not really surgeries, but like little procedures. And most of the time for dancers, they actually are pretty common, but you don't get ingrown toenails until you're on point. And I was 9. I was not in point shoes yet. And I remember my dance teacher even saying at the time that was really weird that I was already getting those, but I had it 2 times on my right toe and once on my left toe. It was crazy. And then I also remember, and then one thing for dance background is I've been all over the place for dance. Like, I think I've moved studios like 7 times. And parts of that is just like, you know, the way life works in our family and just like different scheduling and stuff. So like with teachers and classmates, it's like all over the spectrum, you know, it wasn't just like one place. But I remember I noted like 10 years old, when I was 10, that was the first time a teacher ever told me that I had really ugly lines. Like, she said my knees were like weird and my shoulders were uneven. Now we know that's due to like my scoliosis and stuff, but I remember like being like, I don't think I took it to heart really at that age, but as I got older and started wanting to do dance more, and those comments started coming in, I remember I definitely let that get to me a bit. Let's see. Oh, and I also noted I had a really big hip problem when I was 11, so I actually went to physical therapy for that. And then at 12, I went to my very first ever ballet summer school. So basically, it's a really big intensive. Some are just as small as 2 weeks. That's the one I went, or I should say some are 1 week, but like 2 weeks to some can be like 8 weeks. So if you're like 16, 17, 18 people, like go away for the whole summer and you're training like 6 to 8 hours a day, like it's crazy. So the first time I did that was when I was 12, and I just went, it was a local one. Well, semi-local. It was about like 2.5 hours away. And so I went to that, and I had a lot of problems there. I think the big one I noted for that one specifically was my hip problems. I remember that's the first time I think I started actually subluxing my hip, because there was a couple times like it would make a really loud noise. A lot of people heard it, and then, you're out for the rest of the class. And so that was crazy. So obviously I just started getting a lot more problems trying to go intense. And then I also noted, I didn't even think about it until, reading on the question for the podcast and everything, but I totally forgot. It was at that summer, the same summer when I was 12, I went to a summer camp, and there was like, think of a giant like slip and slide, but it was a giant tarp, like huge. And there was like soap all over it, and everybody was like running and sliding. And like I ran on it and I slipped and fell on my tailbone. And, normally, like, people, it might just be bruised and it might hurt for a bit, but like that took me out of dance for like 3 months. Like it was crazy. Like I could barely walk, and I totally forgot about that because it wasn't really dance related, but just really like injury prone related. And yeah, that was crazy. But then I ended up going back to the same intensive the next year when I was 13, and I had even more problems, because then I started having really, really major knee problems. And that one was actually sad, because with these summer schools, they're, as you can imagine, if you're living on campus, they're very expensive. So as an 11 and a 12-year-old, when I'm saving up for that summer, I worked so hard. I did babysitting jobs and lawn care, and we did a lot of can drives, and my mom helped me so much with that side of things. So we did a lot. It became like a full-time job to save up. So specifically 13 was so hard. When I was 13, the second year I did it, because I was out most of the summer school. Like I wasn't able to do pretty much anything. And, it's like those little things you don't think about, right? Either like, I also remember like, because it's a lot of money to save up for and everything. Yeah. And I just noted here that back problems started getting worse too at age 13. And I also underwent a lot of hospital testing also at that age, so that took me out of dance for a bit. Oh, and then this is also interesting because it's a POTS thing. So 13 was the very first time I passed out, I think in a public setting. I know I did one time at a homeschool co-op, but it was in dance class. And I remember I told my mom, because I also didn't want to make her feel bad or her nervous. And I remember I told her, I'm like, I think I kicked myself in the head and like fell backwards or something. But like my dance teacher told me that I was just dancing and literally just fell on the floor and like collapsed. So yeah, but that was just interesting because it's obviously a POTS thing, but that's the first time I noted that. And then in December 2019, when I was 13, I ended up getting pneumonia, kind of, because the way I say that is because they tested me at the doctor for everything, and they said I had a virus in my lungs, but they didn't know what it was. So it was probably COVID, but they say it was pneumonia. That's kind of how they try to treat me. But I was out for basically 8 months because I tried to, like, I would be out for a few weeks, try to go back, and then out, like the fever would come again. And then thankfully quarantine actually did help me because it forced me to rest and everything like that. So yeah, that was crazy. And then, back in the fall, I, got back at dance, but I did a little differently. We did just virtual, just to stay at home. So I actually I decided to do it again and torture myself. I joined a pre-professional ballet school, actually located in Montreal, Quebec. So I was just like doing Zoom classes with them. So that was it was a great experience. I love it. Don't regret it at all. But obviously I noted there, that's when I realized dance wasn't going to be a career for me, because since I was about 6, I always said I want dance to kind of be my career, whether that was professional or teaching or both, But then I realized that I just couldn't do it. I mean, it just kept causing me so much pain, so much illness. At that same time, I also volunteer taught ballet classes for a studio in Guatemala, which was also amazing. I got to crash course Spanish, so I could teach like the beautiful little students there in Spanish. But it was also so hard because I had to cancel so many times last minute, because as you know, with chronic illness, it's like so many times you're like fine, and then all of a sudden you're not fine, and you can't even push through. So I remember being so frustrated and hard on myself, because like well, I obviously can just push through this migraine, or like it's just nausea or whatever it is. I can, push through this. And so obviously looking back now where I am, and I'm like, I realized that I couldn't have, but in the moment I remember beating myself so much for that. I then in 2021 in April, I ended up taking a 3-month break from dance. I kind of dropped out completely, took a 3-month break. And then in the summer, I did another summer intensive. It's crazy. I always laugh at it now because I'm like, wow, I really tried. But it was amazing, actually. It was Paradosi Ballet. So I don't know if anyone knows what that is, but it's a ballet company in Washington. So I went all the way from the East Coast to the West Coast to go there. It was just a week. It was amazing. They're a Christian company, so we did lots of scripture things and Bible study and worship. It was amazing. But once again, saved up so much money, and I wasn't able to dance a lot of it because I ended up having not just knee and hip problems now, then my Achilles tendons started flaring up too. So yeah, but I was so glad that was actually my last summer intensive, like a big one like that. So I'm glad that got to be my last one because it was so Christ-centered. But yeah, and now I shouldn't say now, but at 15, so fall of 2021, I finally joined the studio I'm at now. Like I said earlier, I've done about 7 or so studios. So I've stayed at this one for a couple of years, and I absolutely love it there. But it is like a recreational studio. Like, it's not like a pre-professional like company or anything. However, like the training there is so good. The teachers there are so lovely. And so I feel like it's just a perfect fit, because if I'm only dancing 2 days a week or whatever, but like I feel like I still am learning and growing. But my 2 years there have been anything less than simple, that's for sure. So it started off in that October. I actually got COVID again, but like this time it was official because we obviously took the test and everything. But I was out for about a month. And then everything was just kind of the normal for dancing. And then February of 2022, I was actually out for 2 months at dance because I was in and out of the hospital for a lot of different testing and everything like that. And that's kind of when I tell people February 2022, where my illnesses started to really progress and take a big progression turn. And then I was able to do the show and everything. And then somehow, I just saw an opportunity to do something, and I decided to take it because that's what we do. And then in that summer, so last summer, 2022, there was a musical, and they needed some ballet dancers for a ballet scene. So it wasn't anything crazy like a full ballet production, but it was about a 5-10 minute scene, and actually an excerpt from Swan Lake. And it was so amazing. And there was actually like a little audition thing, and I ended up getting Odette, which is the main swan, like the principal role for it, which was amazing. I'm so glad I got an opportunity to do that, because that was going to be officially my last opportunity to do something so grand. But once again, it was anything but pretty, because I got a really bad injury again, which is so crazy because it was kind of a stress injury out of nothing, because the only thing we can guess as a family what happened is it was my right foot. And for the audition, like we were like in like a not gymnasium, like a cafeteria floor. And I remember after that, then that's when my foot just started going kind of downhill and everything. But everyone was also, like, all the dancers were also leaping and jumping on it, and all of them were fine. So I think my body just is so prone to that kind of stuff. But it was an experience, all right. I never thought I would have an experience of crying and limping backstage. My foot was so swollen, it took me about 30 minutes to put my point shoes on. It was like a balloon. And then running on stage, smiling like nothing happened, and running off stage sobbing, like, I get to say I had that experience now. Like, so it's crazy. And now we're finally coming up onto this year, this past year dance, which has been the most insane year of my life for dance and really ever. But oh my goodness. So I was out the whole month of September. Part of that was because actually my older sister got married, so I was already going to be gone for a week. But then we all got COVID again. So it's so funny. Like, we all got COVID again, like our whole family. So I was just out because of that. And then I was there October, and then November and December, I was out those 2 months because I ended up getting the flu, like November 2nd or something. And that took me to the hospital again and everything. It was crazy. So I was out those 2 months. And then January, I was in the whole month. So that was great. And then February, every other week I was out just because of, as you know, the flare days. I mean, you just can't predict those a lot. Like, there's some things you can push through, like just the daily pain and illness. And you just find out there's some things you just physically can't. And then I was out 3 more weeks from March to like April. I want to say it was directly after my birthday, which my birthday is March 21st. So I think it was about the 25th. We don't really know. I mean, I ended up just getting like another virus and just got infected in like my lungs and my throat and stuff. I was bedbound for like 21 days. So also crazy. And then I was there struggling a lot from like April to the beginning of May. And then for right now, it does end a little bit in a sad journey because then Friday, May 5th, I had to cancel dance, and then I've never been able to go back. And I actually had to get pulled from my spring performance, which was obviously very difficult. There was definitely a lot of tears shed and everything. So right now, the dance journey kind of seems like it ends kind of sad, but my goal is, Lord willing, that if my doctors and I can kind of manage some of these more critical symptoms, that I can get back to it hopefully in the summer. So that's like the overview on the journey there.
Wow. And just so frustrating, like every time. And because I know, like, as someone else was chronically ill, as soon as you're like, okay, then I was going to do this thing, like, I'm like, no, what's coming next? Like, is it going to end? Because we do this to ourselves, right? Where we're like, oh, we're having a good day, or we're excited about dance or whatever activities anybody likes to do. And then it gets to that moment and we realize, like, okay, maybe I can't do this, or like an injury comes up or a sickness comes up. Like, it's so frustrating. And especially to see, like, you at such a young age to be missing out on these things that, like, I, as someone who's 28 years old, get told you're too young for this. Right. So, like, how many times have you gotten told that you're too young for this?
Oh my gosh, so often, right? And I mean, I'm sure, obviously, like you said, you've, been told that too, but all like the little things, right? Like, oh, you just say something like, oh man, like my knees are hurting, my back. You're like, oh, wait until you get older. You don't know any of that. Or exactly, like, you don't, the phrase, I love it. There's like a sticker that says, yes, I know I don't look sick, like, exactly, I think it's so funny that that's something that maybe people tend to think is like, I'm still a teen girl. I love to like hear, I curled my hair for this, I put in my earrings and stuff. Like, I still love to be put together and, look nice, but doesn't mean that, we're not sick, right? So, yeah.
Yeah. Oh, that's so difficult. And especially because other people don't get it, right? Like, we can talk and be like, oh, I could see how hard that is, or I'm frustrated for you and all these. But people who don't live this way, they're like, what the heck? You're 17 years old. You should be able to do this, right? So how do you navigate, like, teachers and classmates and all of other people outside of you who don't understand your illness? What do you do about that?
Yeah, so obviously for one, that's something I think it's a lifelong thing you're gonna have to battle with, like your own pride, like, why don't they understand? And, things like that. And actually the first thing I wrote down is gonna seem a little backwards at first, but is realize that you don't want them to understand. And what I mean by that is if you are saying that you want somebody to understand, that means basically you're telling them, like in your heart or whatever, that you want them to be sick like you. And, when you put it in that perspective, you're like, oh, whoa, like I would never want like your loved ones or your classmates or your teachers to like go through what you go through. And so I think that's a big thing. Like more recently, I've realized too, like, of course, like there's the compassion and stuff you want, but to specifically understand, you wouldn't want your loved ones to understand. That's something I've been, thinking about. And also, something that all these things I'm writing down, like I wrote down, like I need to keep telling myself because, I need to do this too. But also like, accepting that you're different than everyone else, because if you don't, you're going to feel like you're getting special treatment. So specifically in dance wise, like I would push myself so much. Like I don't need the break, I don't need to go take medicine or sit down, or I have to do this. Everyone else is working just as hard and, things like that. But because I'm still putting them like I'm the same, and it's not some sort of like belittling way, like, oh, I'm so different. But it is important to accept that you're different, because if not, now you're going to feel like you're getting special treatment when instead you're just getting what you need because you need a little bit of different, things. So it's important, like if you're doing an activity or whatever, for me for dance, that, I need to sit down, or I need to have extra water, or maybe I can't do that combination that everyone else can and everything. So that's something that I need to just continually be telling myself that too. So that helps. Then you don't feel like the burden, the special treatment, which I know we're going to talk about that whole burden thing later too, because that's a big one for everyone. Yeah. And another thing I wrote down is also about being open to. I've also been like, I'm a person that I just don't like talking about myself at all. I remember like I had to write down so many detailed things for this because I'm like, I want to make sure, this is an opportunity to help others too. And so it's so hard. It's not that I would say I'm closed off. It's just like I want to be there for others and I want to hear others. And so it's one thing that's so hard to like share about myself. But also realizing that with different personalities, since I am more of a personality that likes not talk about myself as much, is that you can be open without having to share all your symptoms, if that makes sense. I am currently found the word from just another chronic illness YouTuber. I don't know why I never heard it before, but symptomatic. I am like loving that word recently because then you can easily tell people like, hey, right now I'm like not feeling good. I'm really symptomatic or something. And you don't have to go into detail if you don't feel comfortable about everything, And I think that's something for other people listening, whether in my life or other people who you may not have chronic illness, is that, that if they don't have to share like all the details. So if they're just telling you they're not feeling well or they're symptomatic, kind of take them at their word and understand that they're struggling, and maybe just don't belittle them, or brush it off a little bit. So yeah, that's kind of,
No, that's so good. And I mean, everything you said was so helpful. And I love what you said about like not wanting other people to understand. Is that I never thought about it that way. But I always talk about like, oh, we shouldn't, force other people to understand. They never will. But I never thought about it like, no, I don't actually want them to understand, because like this thought gives me peace all the time of like when I'm like, oh, why does everything happen to me? Like, why am I always so sick? And it's like, wait, no, I'm so glad it's me and not my husband or my kids or my parents. Like, aren't I glad that I get to do this and not have to watch someone else do this? Because that in some ways is way harder. So that is so good. So what advice do you have for someone who maybe has activities that they like to do and they're not able to fully do them or do them at all due to their illness?
Yeah, so obviously kind of also what you're saying, there's like a variety too. Like there's some people that maybe can't do them as much, or there's some people that can't do them at all. So I'm trying to like kind of do both there. But obviously this one just seems so simple, but it's so true. And it's something I also need to tell myself too, is that to do less of it and have breaks, and not just breaks in it, but like breaks of it. So just per se, like just using my journey of dance, for example, like, instead of being in a pre-professional school where you're dancing so many hours a day, like 5 days a week, now we're going to dance less hours a day, only 2 days a week. And even the aspect of breaks, there's been many times in my journey where I had to take a few months off because my illnesses just got too much. So just whatever activity, that know that it's okay to like take breaks. And also, incorporate breaks in it. Like that's something I'm telling myself too, that it's, we're not going to be like somebody who's like healthy and able-bodied who can maybe do something for 3 hours in a row. Like that might be a lot. So it's important and good to take breaks even during it. And also remember why you love the activity, because, okay, so this is like a phrase I've been using to explain to people, and it's going to sound sad at first, but I promise it's not actually supposed to sound sad. It's just supposed to also help you realize it. So using my word for dance in it, you guys can replace the word in whatever activity. But like I always say, I love dance, but dance doesn't love me. So it's just like you have to realize like why you love it. Kind of go back to your things. Like for me, I just love dance because I just love worshiping the Lord in that way. Like it's just such a beautiful art form, and I just feel like I can truly like worship the Lord and be free in it. So yeah, remember you love it, but also it's good to kind of have the balance of accepting, like, so you're not doing some sort of expectation level, that it's just, it might not love you, like we might be trying to do something that our bodies don't like. So it is kind of good to, understand that, of course, not dwell on it, because we don't want to become some sort of like really mopey, sad people. But at the same time, I think that's also something that's interesting to think about. Also, remember that your hobbies and activities don't define you. This is a really important one. There's a lot of people, you see athletes out there who, whether they're, healthy, able-bodied or whatever, they're like, there's thing they say like, oh, I'm a gymnast, or I'm a dancer, I'm a basketball player, or whatever it is, right? And that's just kind of becomes their identity. And you see it too, like it just in the sports world, like they get a career-ending injury and it's almost just, it just wrecks their life. Because that was their whole life. So you just got to know that those hobbies and activities don't define you as a person. That's just something like that you do. Like, so for me, I always say that I am Sabina, I'm a child of God, and I also do blah, 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 right? I'm not a dancer. Like, that's not like my identity. So it's important to also just kind of change your mind frame in that. And when you do, the blow of certain things will be less. So even though it was a very tough blow, don't get me wrong, it was a very hard blow with not doing the performance this spring, but it was a lot less than it could have been since dance wasn't my identity. And then, of course, another basic one would be to make new hobbies, just so you have other things, you can do, like just simple things, like even reading. That's what I've been trying to get more into, because that's such a relaxing, healthy activity you can just do in bed, or anything, whether that's art or editing or whatever it is, something that is not exerting. And you can just do multiple different ones for different days. Like one day you can read, but one day you can't. So maybe you do a different hobby. So that's kind of what I have there.
That's so good. So helpful, because I think like for me, I had this life plan. Like this is what's going to happen. And I had it all laid out in my mind, and I didn't have the little things, but I thought, oh, the big things, like I'm going to be able to do those things. I'm going to be able to work. I wanted to be a teacher. I'm like, I'm going to be able to be a teacher. Easy. Like, how would I not be able to do this? And then I get sick and it's like, oh, no, my life has gone a different way. And now looking back, I love podcasting and YouTubing and all of that. And like, would I have ever done that if I had done teaching? Probably not. I don't think I would have had the time. And so I like to remind myself when I'm in those moments of like, eventually I'm going to look back and be like, oh, this was actually the better plan for me. I actually found a better hobby for me, even though at the time it seemed like this devastating blow that I'd put my whole soul into. This is who I am, and realizing that like I can be someone else too, and still grieving that loss, right? Like you can still grieve the loss that you couldn't do the spring performance, or like I couldn't be a teacher, but still have that mindset of like, okay, but could something good still be out there? Is there another way that I can view my identity or who I am that doesn't have to have that? So that's so good and helpful. So have you gained confidence in yourself while maybe having to quit things, using mobility aids, or not participating in activities that your friends do or other people around you do? Where does the confidence come from?
Yeah, okay, so this question, I remember at first was so hard, like, come up with something because, like, I tend to be, like, the whole, like, woe is me type thing, like, I don't do anything good and all that stuff, which I also noted here, actually, like, that's a big struggle of mine, like, the pride of inferiority. Like, we tend to think that the only pride is, like, if you're superior, like, oh, I'm better than you type thing. But there's also the other pride of trying to put yourself so low. So that's something I struggled with a lot. But I realized that even when I was sharing a little bit of my journey with you, that I've come a long way since November, specifically when I started using mobility aids. So, yeah, basically, it's hard to explain too, because I'm sure a lot of people with chronic illnesses, and you can relate to this, when there's a specific like event in your life for like illness, sometimes it can become a blur. Like November, so much happened at once. I mean, I went from like November 1st just walking around, and then by the end of November, like I went from like a cane to a walker already, and just like so much progressed so fast. So I wish I could kind of say like a little bit of how that happened, but I can't. However, I will say that I do remember a lot. Mentally, in November, I was at one of my lowest of lows. Like, that's what we're also going to talk about a little bit too with the burden feeling. That was a huge month of that. And yeah, so to think of where I am now here in June and where it was in November, there's a lot that's come. So I kind of try to jog my memory a little bit to kind of share a little bit of my experience to try to help others and encourage others out there. I mean, the big thing is it's really embracing the hard beginning. So obviously there's going to be the first for everything, specifically for me with mobility aids. Like it was like, I remember like I was having panic attacks just going into church, like for the first time, going to use a cane. And now I go into church a lot of times with a wheelchair. So there's a huge difference even there from November. But I remember just freaking out. And, so, I mean, it's just an encouragement, like, or I should say, yes, it's an encouragement, but a little bit of the not sugarcoating it. There's nothing to get around the hard beginnings. Like you try to do everything. I remember I was probably even looking up on YouTube, like, how to have confidence going into like school or work or the first time with a walker or something. And but really the truth is there's no way to sugarcoat it. It's going to be very hard. I mean, it depends, yes, on your personality, but extrovert, introvert, social anxiety or not, I think every single person would be very anxious about some sort of big life change about that. So but whenever you kind of face those first things, like for me, it would be church. It was going to the first time to a grocery store, doctor's appointments, all that stuff. Once you start to face those first and get them out of the way, then continuing at it was a good thing, which obviously in my case, it's not like I really had much of a choice. The choice would have been if I listened to kind of Satan's voice and stuff and stayed at home and decided not to go anywhere. So yeah, so I guess the continuing at it was a big thing. However, like when I like think about it, I feel like I still had so many like months of just like anxiety and stuff for it. And I'm gonna like talk about a little bit. The big thing for me in my confidence journey was actually going to a youth conference with my church for a weekend, because obviously that was without like my parents and everything. That was like a full weekend with peers and everything. So that was like a big thing, because obviously every single person watching this, I mean, depends your age, but every single person's been a teenager. And that those are some of the hardest years with just adjustments and changing. I mean, like hormones and all the things. And so obviously adding mobility aids and chronic illness to it is a very big struggle. And so I remember just being really nervous about that. But the conference, actually, I have just some written down of some memory things there, because It was crazy. But that definitely pushed me. So that was in March, and after that, I felt like I've been a lot more confident. It's such like a cliche thing, but the faking it till you make it. I know I thrived on that in the beginning, like especially when I got like my wheelchair in January. Like I felt like I had this fake like extrovert presence. Like as soon as like my friends or whatever would walk in the door, I like built up this aroma to get such engulfed in a conversation that I would ignore everyone else around me. So it was definitely like, it definitely had its healthy moments and benefits, because I actually became close with another friend because of that, because I was so forced extrovertedness that I actually ended up getting like another really close friend from it. So there was definitely like, really great benefits. But I know I definitely felt so fake, because I'm like, this is just not me. I'm forcing myself so much just to be confident. But I also will say the confidence will come over time when you fake it. And that's where I was going to get at with this whole conference thing. Showing other people that you're comfortable helps them to be comfortable too. So I remember at the conference, there was somebody, I didn't really know them at all at the time. And now we actually are like, mutual friends and stuff. But like, and I remember they said something like, hey, are we going to address the elephant in the room? Like, why is Sabina in a wheelchair? I remember my friends were like, don't say that. That's so mean or whatever. And I after the service, because it was right before the service, I went up to them and I was like, hey, that's actually not a bad question. And my friends were with me too. I'm like, that's actually like very legitimate. Like, you know what I mean? Like, so I think also showing yourself that you're there, like I was comfortable and I was open to questions, and we kind of talked back and forth. There's some other people that asked questions. And that instantly, I remember, I'm so glad that happened the first night, because it made a lot of people around me way more comfortable. I think showing that you yourself are comfortable so helps a lot. And I feel like then I started to actually get comfortable. And also something for me, this is not going to be for everyone at all, but this was part of me and my journey. I like to think of myself as a funny person. Like I love humor, like, and I totally get that from my dad and my brother. So I thank them for that. But so that's not for everyone, but I totally like joke about myself, and like in like a healthy way. There's good healthy times to do it. Like, of course, if I am like in the hospital dying or something, I wouldn't want to be joking about that. But there are certain times, if I'm just in my everyday normal kind of thing, it's fun. And I want other people around me, like my peers at church and stuff, learned that they can do jokes, they can laugh at mine. And, it just created such a comfortable environment. So even though I'm not like friends with everyone, it just made it, knowing that like people were comfortable, I was comfortable, I think that helped a lot. So I guess in just like the overview of it, it would just be one, it started with faking it, right? Faking the confidence, but then knowing that it really will come. And also just letting yourself be comfortable and showing that you're comfortable, it really will make a big difference, because then other people will be comfortable around you. So I'd say that.
Yeah, that's so true. I think we do have to kind of fake it sometimes. Like, I like to think that I'm practicing. Like, I'm practicing getting more comfortable at this. And I'm not going to go from feeling super insecure about this to then the next day, like, oh, I'm super confident, I feel great. No, I have to practice, just like you have to practice dance, right? In order to get better, you have to practice feeling confident. And I think when something becomes more normal to you, then it becomes more comfortable to you, right? Like, I wear compression socks and I wear them with shorts or like a dress. And I talked to a girl who had POTS, and she's like, I just can't wear them. It looks weird, or it makes me feel uncomfortable. And I think like it literally doesn't cross my mind. Like, it never crosses my mind. Like, is this going to look weird if I wear my compression socks with this dress? It doesn't cross my mind anymore. It used to, but it's because it became normal to me, right? And I also like to kind of like channel my future self and be like, okay, since right now I don't feel confident, I'm going to talk to my future self and just know that eventually confident Aimee is there. What would she do in this situation? How would she be thinking? And I'm going to practice now so that eventually I'll get there. Like, I just like to believe she's out there. There's a confident Aimee out there. And she might be able to give me some advice, or I might be able to say, how would she handle this situation? Because we do have to practice it. It doesn't just come naturally, especially when you're alone in that. If you're surrounded by other people using it, then you're at a POTS conference, like, great, like, we're all doing the same thing. But when you're not, it feels like you're out of place. So I think that's great advice. Practice makes perfect, right? So I know we've kind of mentioned this a little bit, but I want to dive a little bit deeper into feeling like a burden, because I think we all feel that way when we live ill. Other people have to do stuff to help us. We can't do everything on our own. And I think it's a very common complaint to feel like a burden. So how do you navigate needing help from parents, friends, teachers, without feeling like a burden, or is that possible?
Yeah. So, I mean, yeah, I guess at first I'll say it's kind of like what we've been talking about the whole time. Like, it is a journey. And I think it's so easy to like put so much pressure on yourself, like that you have to be at like 100% now. It's like, I have to be like right now, knowing that I'm not a burden, when that's just not going to be possible. It's a journey and it's a process, and also the ups and downs, right? There's probably going to be some days you feel totally okay to ask for help, and there's some days you're just like, you don't want to put that pressure. So I mean, I guess about that too is it obviously it's the hard thing, like no one wants to hear it, but it is the truth. Like, it takes time and it takes healing. Once again, it's using my November self, for example, like also what you're talking about too with the future and everything like that. Like, my November self looking at myself now in June, like just unrecognizable. Like, even though I feel like I have so much more to go, like I've just come so far since November, and just with all the feelings and mental lows there. So just know that like over time, as much as it's hard to say and hard to comprehend now when you're in the thick of it, but there will be healing and stuff there. And again, I think I've said this a couple times, but it is accepting, it's hard, but it is accepting that you're different and or disabled and you're not healthy or able-bodied. Because if you put yourself in this, you're like everyone else. Like, I've just done this for basically my whole life. Like, I haven't really started accepting it until more recently. You're just putting some unhealthy comparison levels by, when you can't do things that they can do. And then you're not going to be wanting help, because then you think that like, then that's where you're going to really feel like the burden feelings. Because if you're just being like, well, they, Susie over there doesn't ask for help, even though she's totally, fine with like at least health wise and stuff. So just understanding that, we are different and we were made differently. I think that also can understand that you can ask for help, because a majority of the time, yes, there are going to be people in life that obviously they don't want to understand, they don't care, whatever, but a majority of people genuinely do care for us, right? And I think we have to remember that is, of course, there's going to be people that are very judgmental and like seem like, they're so against us. But I feel like a majority of people in our life, parents, family members, friends, whatever it is, genuinely do care. And even if they don't know how to help, there's no ill intent there, right? They do want to help. So, understanding that. And also a big one is where I still struggle with too, is that like, even if you may feel like that, or even if it really looks like that, it's not your fault. So there's been a lot of times even recently, like canceled vacations. Like, we've had some few family vacations planned with camping and stuff that had to be canceled on my part because I was sick and I couldn't go. And that's when it really is so hard not to go in that mental place. We're like, well, clearly if I was healthy or, whatever, like then it would have been fine. So clearly it is my fault and I am a burden. But you have to remember, it's not your fault, right? You didn't want this illness. You didn't want this disability, whatever it is. So I think reminding yourself of that is also so important too. And also for me, a big one was like the mobility aids, like as simple in the beginning with the wheelchair and everything. Like my dad was the only one who could like load it in and out of the car. And I always felt like, I'm like, man, if I just didn't have that, if I didn't need that, then it would just be so much easier. Or the fact on relying on other people for help, right? It's just like, it's definitely a humbling experience in its own way, like literally like needing help. It's not even like you want it or whatever. That's like you don't have a choice. And also kind of what I mentioned earlier, how most people genuinely do care. Just remember that the Lord has placed people in your life like to help you. So like for me, like he's placed my parents in my life and, my family members, or like, even like whether it's teachers at like a dance studio or whatever it is that like for your life, whatever it might be, that like he's placed people in your life who do want to help. Even if it looks like there's some people right now currently in your current life that look like they don't want to help or they're mad or whatever it might be, but that there are people out there who do want to help you. And as much as I think for me and my journey's been hard because I am a very acts of service output for my love language. That's always how I've been, not input. So I don't like when people serve me. So it's been a journey there to like actually need to have people serve me. So yeah, but knowing that he's also placed people in my life to help me, and that's important to realize too. So
yeah, and I think there's a reason for that like you were given this so you could learn that. I feel the same way. Like I needed to learn to accept help, because if everybody was serving all the time then and nobody accepted help, then it's like we're not serving, right? So somebody does need to be the person who's who needs help, and I think it's an uncomfortable place to be in sometimes. So how do you or do you still give back and serve others while you're sick? How do you navigate that?
Yeah, so I really, especially like in recent months, I've been really taking advantage of my certain points in the day and stuff that I am well enough and mobile enough, because obviously just like with my different symptoms, it can go up and down. So I still love, it's actually one of my favorite things to do. I love housework. I love cleaning up the house. I love it because it's just a way to like serve my family, obviously, and kind of show them that I love them. That like it's one of my favorite ways to kind of show my love. And I also know it can glorify the Lord because I'm honoring my parents and everything. But like genuinely, it's not like a chore to me. Like I love doing it. I play the worship music on the Bluetooth speaker and I jam out and I clean the house. I can clean the house for hours at end and I love it. So obviously it's still hard because I can't do it as much as I used to. But I try to take advantage whenever I can to do that as like a priority. But other ways that I've been more recently learning to serve others is that me and a friend from church who actually also has chronic illness, we both started a writing ministry at church. So we have a prayer guide at our church of all the different prayer requests throughout the week. And we pray over the different elders and families that week. So we write them all cards and we put them in the mail so that they get a letter in the mail. And so that's a very new thing that we've been doing. And I love it. Like I've always loved writing letters and it's just like such a perfect way to kind of serve and encouragement. And I can just do it in bed and stuff and write letters in bed. So that's another thing that I've been doing. And also a very small and more silly thing, but a lot of my peers at church, they know whenever like I'm in the wheelchair and they're pushing me, I always grab like their water bottles or their Bibles or their books and I'm like, let me serve. And it's just kind of like our little thing at church. So they know, everyone knows around me to give me their Bible and their water bottle so I can hold on to it for them. But yeah, so just like little things like that. And I mean, I'm sure I have so much room for growth and stuff. And I know, you know, it's a lifelong journey. So the Lord will just keep giving me more stuff to like find out different ways I can serve. But as in like personally at the moment, those are the kind of things I've been doing.
Yeah, that's so beautiful. And I think it's when we focus on what we can do. We're so focused on what we can't do that it gets really frustrating, right? I always think if my house is perfectly clean, but there's like one pile of clothes on the floor, my eye goes straight to the pile of clothes, even if everything else is spotless, right? And that's what we do with ourselves and our own brains is we're like, okay, I know there's all these things I can do, but I don't even see them because I'm so focused on like, I can't do this. I wish I could do that. And knowing that there are options to serve, and like, it might even be that you just brighten someone's day by, you know, you having this great attitude in your wheelchair at church and asking to carry other people's stuff. Like, it doesn't have to be a big thing. Like, it always feels like it needs to be like, oh, I need to go like take my neighbors a casserole. They just had a baby. And it's like, okay, no, I could do something different. We've started just giving paper plates and silverware to people who like we know like are struggling or have just had a baby or, in some situation like that, we're like, we're just going to take that off. I cannot go over and do your dishes. I can't come clean your house. I can't make you dinner. Oh, wait, there are some things that I can do even in the situation I am in. Anyway, that was so beautifully said. How do you still find joy in a life full of pain? That's a tricky thing to do. But you do so, like, you just light up. Like, I just being here with you, I'm like, I'm in a good mood now.
Oh, well, thank you. I mean, the only thing I really can say is, like, for me personally, like, I can't take any other credit but, like, then give it to the Lord. Like, in my personal life, I just talked about this with my parents recently. Like, I literally can't even, like, fathom, like, living the life I live with chronic illness, like, without knowing the Lord. Like, I don't even know where I would be. Like, I feel like I would just be in, like, this depressed, miserable, sloping attitude and everything. So, I mean, for me, it's all the Lord. And it's, people probably be like, think exactly what you're saying, like, well, but then you're always in pain and you're always sick, or you can't do these things, or what do you mean the Lord has blessed you so much? And, but I mean, it's just all, like, him and what he's done for me, and obviously saving me, in my sinful state. I mean, I sin so much. I mean, of course, like, you don't see it, right? Whether it's like online or whatever, you always see highlights. But I think it's important a reminder for everyone who might be like, wow, they're so put together, or, like, they look like they're perfect in a way. Obviously, we all know that's not true, but, like, man, I mean, I feel like I don't get out of bed without already sinning, whether that's in my thoughts or my heart or whatever. So, I mean, he saved me from so much, and I'm so grateful. And another thing that gives me joy is kind of in the next question, so I can kind of go over that again a little bit, but is more recently what I've been doing, and it was something like the Lord just kind of placed in my heart, but is, I call it counting my rainbows. So basically just counting my blessings in a way. But, like, I remember it was actually like a few weeks ago during when I was pulled from my spring performance, and it was on one of the dress rehearsal days. So obviously I already knew that I should be on stage right now in costume and makeup and everything. And I was having a very hard day, crying and everything. And as I was crying, I was so sick that day. I just sat on my bed and I counted all the things, like, as simple as I remember even saying, like, I love this water bottle. Like, it's like, I don't have to pop the cap. I can just, like, sip on it. Like, I love the water bottle. And I was, like, wearing, like, one of my favorite hoodies. I'm like, I love this hoodie. It's one of my favorite hoodies. And I just kind of went around, like, literally what I could see. I'm like, I love this pillow, and it's all, like, the little things that you just, like, you don't even think about. Because, right, like you were talking about, we just dwell so much on, like, what we can't do or what we don't have and everything. And as simple, like, to other people be like, that's crazy. Like, you're, thankful for your water bottle at the moment or whatever. But it's like, you wouldn't even believe, like, how much, like, joy and stuff that gives you when I just, like, sat down and counted all my blessings. And then, like, I remember praying after that, and I was, like, so filled with joy after that, even though I was, like, so symptomatic at that moment and everything, and struggling a lot. But yeah, so obviously for me, it's all glory to the Lord and everything he's done, and just counting all the rainbows he's given me in my life. So yeah.
Yeah, that's so good. I was struggling a few months ago, and we have, like, a conference in our church every 6 months, and I was praying, like, what am I supposed to do? Like, I'm really struggling. And it was just, like, the most clear answer came to me during the conference. It was like, it's Jesus. Like, that's the answer. Like, you just need to, like, spend more time with Jesus. And I did. And I was like, okay, yep, that was the answer for me. And I know, like, not everyone listening to this is religious. And so you do what feels best to you. But for me, it's like when I miss that spiritual link, it's like the rest of my life falls apart, and I can't explain it in words. Like you were saying, it's like, I don't know why it works sometimes, like, logically, like, it doesn't seem to make sense, but it always does. Everything lines up better when I'm more focused on the spiritual, and everything else falls into place, right? So it's so good. So you shared so much advice for us today, but do you have any other advice you want to leave with any teens or anyone who is living with chronic illness?
Yeah, so obviously one of them was what I just mentioned, which was the counting your rainbows, just as simple as you are. Like, in the moment you are most symptomatic, Like, it seems crazy. Like, that's all you want to dwell on is like how sick you are or whatever at the moment. But then just count all the little things around you, and I'll tell you, that'll definitely boost your mood and your joy and everything. And then once again, just kind of coming back to just some of the themes of earlier, but just accepting you are different, but also remember it's not outside of the Lord's control. So like, it's not like it was ever a surprise. Like, you know, like whether you were sick since you were born or you got sick, you know, like after school or whatever it was, it's not like it was just something random, you know, that's just how we were designed. And it's kind of cool if you think about it. It's as much as it's not, but like just like how we were made differently, right? Like our bodies function differently. Like, isn't that kind of cool that, you know, we're unique in that sense, as much as it's obviously not good, but like just to kind of think about that, like, wow, we were like made differently, you know? Like, so that's just something to also think about, and also obviously accept, because that'll help you in so many areas of life of not, you know, working towards not feeling like a burden, and also knowing you're not getting special treatment. You're just living your life the way you need to. So I think it's also so important for like moving forward and living with chronic illness. Also, this is a big one that I have seen over just my course, especially since I mentioned February of 2022, when my illness has started to progress a lot, is that even though chronic illness is a lifelong trial, there are still seasons in it. And I think that's something good to know. Like, obviously, you know, like whether it's seasons of mental trials and stuff, like for me back in November, or like of maybe big symptoms if you're in the hospital or whatever it is, that even if it's a lifelong journey, there's still like seasons. So you can still like have that, like, you know, hope and know that there's like still like the light at the end of the tunnel, even though it's not like you're gonna necessarily be cured, but that there's just gonna still be ups and downs. So also know you're not gonna be in your darkest moment forever. And I think that's also important to know. And something we also mentioned earlier too, that it's okay to mourn, you know, if you're a teenager like me, the years that, you know, you see all your peers doing all these things that you can't do. It's okay to mourn what you couldn't do. Or, you know, like you mentioned with your teaching years or for dance or whatever it is, like it's definitely, I think there's actually some good in that too, because if we bottle it all up, then it's just going to explode. Like, I've definitely been there where, you know, you bottle up all the mourning and the grief, and then it just comes out. So I think it's actually is healthy and stuff to properly mourn, but however, you know, don't dwell in it, you know, because then if you dwell in it, then you will kind of be down in the dumps a lot. So make sure to have your moment, but then, you know, for me, I always need to, what I try to do is after I mourn to really fill myself up with the Lord again and get that joy. So just make sure you count your blessings, or, you know, glorify the Lord or whatever. And, you know, after that, but yeah, that's kind of the last little bit of advice.
Yeah, that's so good. I love count your rainbows. I'm going to take that, because it's just, it's a fun way to look at it, because it does feel like the rain just keeps pouring. And it's just, every time you see a rainbow in real life, like every time, do you not just feel this peace of like, oh my gosh, that's beautiful. And it's like you forget about the rain in a lot of ways. And you're like, wait, that terrible storm brought this beautiful rainbow. And I think this is how I believe, and everyone can believe whatever they want, but I believe that like I was given this trial for a reason. Like there's a reason that it's here in my life, and I can use that to tear me down and to, you know, shake, whether it's my testimony, shake my mental health, or I can use it to grow, to help other people, to become a better person, right? And I think for so long, I just thought like, oh, it's not going to be better till this is gone. And once I started to believe that like, there's a reason this is here, and I can mourn and I can be sad, and I cry all the time, and it's fine. I let myself cry. I don't tell myself I shouldn't cry and I should just be happy all the time. But I also see that like, even though this is really hard and difficult and I wouldn't wish it upon anyone, I can find the rainbows. Love it. Thank you so much for being here, Sabina. And if anyone else wants more information from you, or to see your YouTube vlogs and things, I will link all that in the description. Do you do Instagram or anything else? We can.
I just do YouTube. I have like a Discord server, and I mean, hopefully soon I'll have a small business. So we'll see.
Yay! That's so exciting.
Yeah.
Well, we'll keep on the lookout for that. I'll have to share. You have to let me know when it's up and running, and I'll share it on my page. So thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, I know. Thank you so much for having me. It was so wonderful. I've been looking forward to it.